Last night on the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. Begin with the news that Russell Wilson is going to be available at seemingly a very low cost. How about Denver? They're going to pick up $85 million in dead money. So somebody can get a quarterback here who can be a good backup or a starter, whatever the case may be, for a very low price, you would seem. And the question would be, would the Steelers be interested? Should they be interested?
Well, absolutely, because the way that contract, you said 85 dead money, he's getting paid $39 million this year, Bob, by the Broncos, regardless of who signs him, and he can't double dip. So if the Steelers were to pay him $5 million, the Broncos would have to pay him the other $34. So he's probably upset with them. Why not stick them with the entire bill, make them foot it, accept the little amount that the Steelers or any team would be obligated to pay him on the veteran minimum salary, which I think last check was $1.21 million. For that amount of money, he is a steal. I don't think he's a great quarterback anymore. He had 26 touchdown passes last year. That was more than Lamar Jackson. They went to Buffalo and won. They were very good in the middle of the season with him, not so good at the beginning and really not so much at the end either. But given what's on this roster and how much he costs, I think it's worth a flyer. And if it didn't work, well then, okay, who cares? He's off the roster next year, and you've got no cap ramifications or dead money or anything like that.
The guy can still move. He had over, I think, 400 yards rushing or over 300, whatever, and still can move, and he has the deep ball down the field. If he gets the kind of protection he needs, he still could be effective. And the Steelers certainly need to fill out their quarterback room, and I would imagine that there are going to be some other people interested. Now, the question is he capable of coming in and being just a backup, or would he want to be a starter? Any decision he would make, I think, would have to answer that question first. If he comes here, to me, he would have to be a starter, don't you think, Andrew? And if not, he'd have to be willing to just accept the role for whatever it is, take the money, and run.
I mean, he could hang out at home with Ciara, or is it Sierra, or is it Ciara? I always say the name wrong. She's very popular, Sierra. He could hang out with her and the kids and make $39 million. It doesn't matter. So if he wants to play in the NFL next year, I don't think he's going to carry a clipboard around and listen to coaches and watch another guy play. I think it's going to be to continue to add to his legacy. He said on Brandon Marshall's podcast he wants to win 2 more Super Bowls. Now, I think that's a little out there. That's far-fetched. I don't see that happening. But he's motivated to play. And I think if he came here, Bob, let me ask you a question. Is he better than Kenny Pickett right now?
Yes, right now, for sure. I think so.
Is he better than Mason Rudolph?
Yes. Right now, I'd have to say that. Yes, he has a resume that cannot be ignored. Is he cheaper than both guys? Yeah, and even, again, if you had the conversation, you could say to him, but you can say to him, look, we're looking for a veteran to come in and help this guy develop. And if you're willing to accept that, we'll take you here. There's no promise you can start, but you may end up starting. I don't know. I
wouldn't tell him that. I'd say you're going to start. Unless, we're going to prepare you in the Arthur Smith offense to be our starting quarterback and to be our guy. And if 5 or 6 games in he stinks and he's shot and he's past his prime and he's too old, well, then you still got another 10 games or whatever to see what Kenny Pickett can do. That's still a lot of games, Bob, for a quarterback. That's still a big body of work to determine if Kenny can still play. But I don't like the idea of fielding a competition in training camp when you've got a new offense. You want to get a quarterback ready to play in a new offense and give him reps to be comfortable in that new offense, not split them in half because you don't know who your quarterback is. That is less than ideal when you have 2 guys who are going to be new to the way the Steelers want to play offensive football.
I think the bottom line is this is a low-risk, low-cost opportunity to make a very high-end reward, potentially. So I think that's something they have to consider. And like everybody else, they're going to have to consider all the ramifications of this. We need to take a break.
And it sounds like of all their options, you like this one the best. Do I hear you right, Bob? Of everything that's out there for the Steelers,
well, no,
this is the one you're the biggest.
I would rather sign Mason Rudolph myself. I still think he has.
But you just said you think Wilson's better.
I do,
but I think better.
Right now, because he's had so many years in the league. Mason Rudolph's had 4 games in 2 years. So, I mean, honestly, he is.
But who gives them a better chance to win next season, Wilson or Rudolph?
I would just like to have him on the roster for that price, and whatever happens, happens. if you're going to bring in Ryan Tannehill, why not Russell Wilson? You tell me who has a better resume and who would cost less. It would be Russell Wilson, I think. So, all right, this is our GMC Sierra tweet of the night from BR Gridiron, and it says, the Steelers' stat is wild. TJ Watt has more sacks than Steeler quarterbacks have passing touchdowns over the last 2 years, 24 and a half to 24. So that pretty much sums it up. We have this tweet here from George Lochner. Again, you could hit us up at KD Pump at the Pony Express. He says, Mason Rudolph proved he can be a starter. Offense looked really good with him in there. He's younger. He should be given an obvious chance. He could be the answer at quarterback instead of wasting another year with Kenny Pickett. So, there's a lot to prove for everyone here. We'll see what they do with this. In the meantime, the Justin Fields situation continues to just hang out there. There's got to be somebody who's going to make a play for this, right? Somebody has got to end up with Justin Fields. Chicago has got to deal him based on what they're planning to do. The question is, there's someone just kind of lurking in the weeds waiting for, a real tremendous opportunity, which is like a third-round pick for him, and say, we'll do it. We need somebody like that.
Well, and Adam Schefter said it again today on McAfee's show, that there are people in the Steelers organization who really like Justin Fields. We know who he's talking about, Mike Tomlin. He's brought that up before. So is Jerry Dulac. So have I. And if the price keeps falling, at what point does the coach, who has so much power in this organization, he has been here for so long, he's involved in the roster construction to a huge degree, at what point, Bob, would Mike Tomlin step in and say, hey, I know our initial plan was Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph, but this price, we can't pass it up. We can't say no. Bob, maybe that beautiful house you have in Robinson Township, you've liked it for so many years, but now here's this house in Sewickley, and the price keeps going down and down and down. And now you're going to sit down with Lisa and say, we need this. Little Sonny can have his own wing of the house, okay?
Yeah, my whole
I never
future
thought I could
planned.
afford
I love
this.
it.
Yeah. Right?
No, I
And
get your
so
point. I get your point.
I do think about that we know that the coach likes the quarterback in Chicago who's available, and just they don't want to mess with Kenny, or they don't want to give up a big draft pick. But if you don't have to give up a big draft pick, maybe they revisit that conversation, Bob.
Yeah. There's a lot that still has to play out, and the start of business in the next year begins on March the 13th. So we'll talk about that. I want to go to our number one Cochrane Go One Better caller of the night, and that's going to be Jen in Evansburg. What's up, Jen? Hello, Jen. Jen, that's a big buildup for you, and then you just let it go. Like Elsa in Frozen. Yeah. Let it go, let it go. So you'll learn this too, Pony. You will learn this about all the Disney stuff. All right, with Stella. Let's go out instead to our number one Cochrane Go One Better caller of the night. It's going to be Chris in California. Hey, Chris, how are you?
Hey, what's going on? How's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good, man. I appreciate it. Hey, for all those quarterbacks that are looking for new homes, continue looking, because it's not going to be in Pittsburgh. This is Kenny Pickett's team. And all those other players like Deontay Johnson, they can find a place somewhere else too, because this kid has had an unfair chance. You throw him in at halftime in Week 4, his rookie year, and you expect him to do, with very little chemistry. I mean, the dude was put in the fire to not.
Well, so was Mason Rudolph last year after not playing for 2 years. He looked pretty good. You can make whatever conclusion you want. Is 25 games enough time to make an assessment? The Steelers obviously believe that he still has a lot to offer, and they're going to go with that. And a lot of this has to do with, he was their number one pick, so certainly going to give him every opportunity. But if you're going to use that logic, then Rudolph has shown you a lot as well. So, man, there's a lot of different ways to go. As far as Deontay Johnson, the question will be, I hear this stuff, and you see a lot of stuff online, and I don't know what is true, what is not true. There's a lot of speculation, a lot of rumor, so you want to keep that in mind when you say this. But is Deontay Johnson going to be on this roster this year, Andrew? There's a lot of debate about that.
Yeah, Mark Cavalli said on our radio station this morning that he's not sure Johnson wants to be here and thinks that this rumor might have been started by Johnson. We had the reporter on from Indy who was the first one to put this out there, that that the Steelers, not Johnson, were open to a trade, and he said it was Steelers related and brought up the fact that they're looking for more leadership at the wide receiver position, and that would make sense because I don't think Johnson's the best of leaders. We saw what happened in that Cincinnati game when the ball was on the ground, he didn't even make an effort to pick it up because he was still pouting from the play before. I don't think they'll sign him to an extension that makes him a guy going into the last year of his contract who's going to be consumed by his production and his numbers because he wants another deal. And I just don't think this is the best spot. It's not the most conducive place, Bob, for someone that has that mindset when they're not even really sure right now what their quarterback situation is going to be for week 1.
All right, real quick, I want to mention tonight the Penguins have a game tomorrow against Columbus. I bring it up because Alex Nylander, a man they just traded there, has a hat trick and 4 goals now in 2 games with the Blue Jackets. So he's going to come in here and we'll see what happens. But the situation there is a dire one, and it makes you wonder about Kyle Dubis. With that in mind, let's go to our next caller. That's Jim in Green Tree. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Bob, how you doing? Hey, Flip, how you doing? Bob,
Hey, Jim.
number one, we know the Penguins' season's over. And number 2, quarterback Kenny Pickett, the only trouble with Kenny Pickett is he can't throw the ball real long, and he gets hurt too much.
Well, I think a bigger problem for him is just his unwillingness to stay in the pocket as late as he can. He seems to be always looking to get out of it, escape it, and sometimes you end up in negative situations. But back to Dubis.
That's what Patrick Peterson said, by the way, on his podcast. He said exactly what you said. It really didn't have anything to do with the play calling, Bob. He thought it was exactly that point between Rudolph and Kenny Pickett.
And you saw a difference with Rudolph. Give him in there. He waited and made plays at the last second, willing to take a hit, and sometimes you have to do that. All right. As far as Dubis is concerned, now I got to believe he's made a conclusion that this is not going to work this year. So any chance of them adding on was gone, I think, a while ago, but this just cemented it. So what do? How much do they move? And what is the objective here in terms of right now versus the offseason? I think you could do more in the offseason, but what do you do now if you're him?
Well, the objective is Guentzel and getting the most back for him because you have a deadline on him. If you don't trade him for maximum return this week, you're going to lose him in free agency and possibly get nothing back unless he resigns. And so you've got to try to play these teams against each other. Pierre LeBrun from TSN said as many as 6 suitors and teams that are desperate to get him to win a Stanley Cup. Exactly. So the other things can even wait till the offseason. This cannot. This is pressing. And so that has to be item number 1 on Kyle Dubis's desk. And he's got to win this trade, Bob, because the moves from this offseason for him are not looking good.
Not at all, and they got a lot of issues. Now, here's the wild card. Let's say at the end of Thursday business, they're still trying to sign Guentzel. I don't know if they are or aren't. They've made a couple of offers. His team has turned it down. If they come to some sort of agreement on a number, would you sign him if that was your number 1 objective? I don't know if it still is at this point.
Yeah, I have no problem with him coming back. I mean, I know he's not a spring chicken either.
But he said he wants to get younger.
Now.
You know, all of it. You got a whole bunch of 30-year-olds and another one who's, going to be 30, and you're not getting younger if you sign him.
No, I agree with that. Look, I like the Guentzel-Sidney Crosby combination. I don't think that that's their problem. I think it's the players below that. And I get it. They've got no movement clauses, and guys like Letang and Malkin don't want to play anywhere else, and that delays changing the roster over and making moves. So they are, in a way, stuck in a bad spot with that. But I think you still try to collect as many good players as you can. And I think Guentzel is rare enough and elite enough where I would try to re-sign him if I could. But I'm not going to overpay him either, Bob. If he wants $11 million a year for 6 or 7 years, he can get that somewhere else.
That's part of the problem they have right now. They have a lot of people tied up to long contracts with no movement ability. So that's going to be interesting to see what they do with him. And that trade deadline is coming up. I want to get this tweet in here before we go. It's about Pitt because they still have a big week of games coming up before the ACC tournament. CB58 said Pitt is favored by 6 tomorrow against Florida State. 9 p.m. start. Big crowd must win. What do you think they'll do, Pony? I think they're going to win these 2 games. I think they're going to the ACC tournament. And then I wonder how much is necessary for them to get in. And once they get in, what would be a successful season for you? Just getting in, or do you need to win a game or 2 in?
No, I think if they get back to the tournament 2 seasons in a row, that's good for Pitt. Given the program, the amount of resources that are put into it. They're not Duke. They're not North Carolina. They're not Virginia. They're not Syracuse in terms of how much money goes into basketball. You do that in back-to-back years at Pitt, that's pretty good. They were picked in the middle of the ACC or maybe the upper half of the ACC, but how many teams from the ACC are going to get in, Bob?
Good
maybe
question.
4?
I don't think Virginia
maybe
should
5?
get in over Pitt, to be honest.
I don't think so either. But here's the question about that, not to bring up my alma mater, but how could you put Pitt in over Syracuse when Syracuse has beaten them twice and they've got basically the same record?
I get
Wouldn't
that.
you have to take them too?
If I'm going to use that philosophy about Pitt beating Virginia, then I'd have to consider it the other way around. Pirates hit a few home runs today. Henry Davis hit his third in 3 straight games. Paul Skeens looked good again on the hill, going over 101 miles an hour. Are you more or less optimistic than you were at the beginning? And I know it's just 10 games of spring training. But do you feel like this team may have some players in play who can come up and make a difference? In terms of power, let's start there.
Not yet. I mean, I do like what I'm seeing from Davis. They just got to find a place to play him, Bob, and it should be behind the plate. Not DH, not right field.
Yeah, and they got some power. I look at Hayes. I look at Sawinski, certainly, Reynolds, and I think O'Neill Cruz can add to that with Henry Davis. And if you want to get your opinion heard, don't forget to tune in to the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call tonight at 10:35 on KDKA+. So give us a call at 412-575-2600. We do it every night after the 10 o'clock news. For CBS News Pittsburgh, I'm Bob Pompeani.